What you are looking at right now is a picture of an IBM PC XT 5160 personal computer with the 5153, color monitor and the original keyboard. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, gee, you're 17 years old. What the hell were you doing with a PC XT? I got it secondhand. I did definitely just get it new, that's for damn sure, but it was secondhand, it wasn't new old stock or anything like that. But what had happened, why I got it, was basically because I took an interest in the keyboard for the family computer, which at the time was a custom-built Pentium 120. So one day, I went downstairs and started hammering on the keys. And this wasn't a very quiet keyboard, it was no Model M. And I don't think it had mechanical key switches either. But the keyboard would make a lot of noise when you pushed keys, and I started mashing on pretty much every single key that I could get my hands on. The machine was off, but I was just mashing on the keys, and of course that brought the attention of everybody else. And so, to mitigate my breaking of that keyboard, we brought out this old thing from the box that it was in storage in, and said, here, use this, break this keyboard if you're going to break anything. But I didn't break the keyboard. I actually got some decent use out of it. When I got it and had 640, or maybe it was 512 kilobytes of memory, I don't remember which, but it had an upgraded 20 megabyte Seagate ST225 hard drive in it, and most likely an upgraded controller as well, since I don't think the original controller could accept a 20 megabyte hard drive, but then again, what do I know? Obviously, I don't know what actually was all in the machine. The only reason why I know it's an ST225 is because I still have the hard drive. It did have the original keyboard, and it did have the 5153 monitor. One thing that I remember about my particular 5153 is that it was quirky. Particularly, the brightness knob appeared to be stuck in what was one of its lowest position. So the picture was very dim, that or it was just old. But playing around with the brightness knob, and I remember doing it, playing around with the brightness knob did nothing. And the contrast, playing around with the contrast also did nothing, or at least nothing noticeable, so maybe it was that entire circuit that didn't work. But in any event, the other thing that it had was a broken cable, and it's CGA, so of course you can't just replace the cable. I don't think you could, I don't remember exactly if you could replace the cable on the back of a 5153. I don't think it was permanently attached, but I don't profess to know. Anyway, there was a break in the cable where if you would move it ever so slightly, it would break the connection between the monitor and you would get nothing. Because I believe it was actually a synchronization or a hold or whatever cable inside that little CGA cable that was broken. But anyway, I had that for, oh gosh, I don't remember if it was 4 or 5 years. I got it in 1999, I know that. But I have to remember, no, maybe it was 2000. It might have been the turn of the century, but either way, or turn of the millennium, although I guess both of them would make sense. But either way, I had that for 4 or 5 years or whatever. Still had it after, but I upgraded to something that was not an oops button. The thing that I upgraded to, unfortunately, has no picture, but it was the custom-built Pentium 120 that I've mentioned before. We upgraded this was in 2004, we upgraded the family computer to the Athlon 1300 Thunderbird system that you've seen before. Although a lot of times I've called it a 2300 Plus, even though that's not what it is. It's even older than a 2300 Plus. But anyway, so that I had for quite a bit of time actually. I learned most of what I know now on that machine, in fact. It had Windows 98 on it, I put Windows 95 on it, I've put Windows NT4 on it. I put Windows ME on it, very briefly. I hated that operating system. But that's pretty much it. For most of its time, it had Windows 98 2nd Edition on it, though. I put a hard drive in that. 2 hard drives in that, actually. That, I guess, is I learned most of what I know about computer hardware on that particular machine. That was at the beginning of 2004. At the end of 2004, I got 3 of these. Not this exact model, although 2 of them were this exact model, P133ST Dell Latitude XPI. One of them was a P100ST, but none of them worked. It was not only my first experience with laptops, but also my first experience building computers out of good working parts in order to get one or more good working machines. I ended up getting 2 good working machines out of it. One of them was put to use for a couple years and then was, well, actually no, it wasn't even a year, a couple months. And then it was gotten rid of. And mine lasted for quite a while. Lasted for 3 years. The laptop experience did not stop there. No. I also got one of these, although not this exact model. Mine was slightly different. This particular one is a Toshiba Satellite Pro 490 CDT. That was not one I had. But I also had something, I got along with it, something that you can hear in the background, although it's not the same model. But I also got something fairly similar to this. Mine was a 430 CDT, this one's a 420. But as you can see, I've got it all set up the same way that I had mine. Windows 95B, with Internet Explorer 5 on it, and all of that whatnot. Actually, I don't think I had IE5 on mine, I think I had IE4. Or I think maybe even still IE3, but I don't remember exactly. But it's set up the way I had mine set up, and this one works, and is in better condition than the one that I had in, ironically, but there you go. I have one of my childhood laptops back after all these years. In 2006, and you can sense a pattern going here, every 1 year, that was not how I wanted to say that. In 2006, and you can probably sense a pattern here, I've upgraded my machine every year, pretty much. Not quite, but almost every year, except with a couple of exceptions, of course. But I got one of these for a birthday present. Not just the case, but the machine that's actually in it, and this is a picture of the machine, and you're not only looking at this picture, I not only still have a picture of it, but I also still have this machine. It's the custom-built Pentium D powered system with 1.5 gigabytes or 2.5? 1.5 gigabytes of memory makes sense. 2.8 gig Pentium D 820. Actually, when I first got it, it had one 80 gigabyte IDE Western Digital hard drive in it. The one that you see there is the second drive, and it was added later on. A non-light scribe capable LG DVD RW drive. I believe it's even a dual layer drive. A non-connected floppy drive. And it was running Windows XP when we first got it. Then we ran Windows Vista on it. And we also got a add-on video card, a Radeon X1300 based card, if I remember right. So it could run the Aero graphics. And of course, that card is now fairly outdated and not very powerful at all. But anyway, it still works, and the system's now running Windows XP once again. But while I had it, it was a Vista machine. I'm sure you all know what happened in August of 2007 from my Toshiba 420 CDT video. And if you don't know, then you should go check out that video, but I'm not going to bother to go through it again. But as a frantic replacement for all the things that just died, especially my computer, we got one of these. This is perhaps the cheapest thing that money could possibly buy in terms of computing equipment in 2007. That is an Asus or Asus or Asus or, you know, whatever. There are hundreds of thousands of pronunciations for that name. Or I suppose you're supposed to call it triple EPC, you know, Eastern Equine Encephalitis. PC 2G Surf model, I believe it was the 900 or 901 or something like that. I don't know though. I don't profess to know a whole lot about it, but now I think my model would have had a Pentium M Celeron M, low-end processor, 512 megs of RAM, a 1 gigabyte flash SSD, very slow and old, and a customized version of Xandros Linux, even though you could run Windows XP on it. There were drivers, and there was also a separate disk that came along with it that allowed you to run Windows XP. All was well and good, even though it didn't have a lot of processing power. It was enough processing power to watch 360p YouTube videos. And at the time, and do text editing, which was all that I really did back then. And it was fine and well for about a year. And then it all ended when I tripped and almost fell down the stairs, but in an effort to not fall down the stairs, of course I was holding the machine, I dropped it, and it fell down a flight of stairs, and that was the end of that. I would like to get another one of those eventually someday, but I don't know if that'll ever happen. And then we come to this piece of junk. This machine I got as a birthday present in 2008. Because thankfully the EEE PC lasted for 2 months after I dropped it. And I was able to still use it until the thing finally died. But we got this. First full-size laptop, first new full-size laptop. The Toshiba Satellite L300D 040 system that I have mentioned probably hundreds and hundreds of thousands of times on my channel. Sorry for the crappy picture, I don't have a better one. But that's my actual machine. As you can see, it looks fairly familiar. For those that have seen my older videos before, everything went to this whole green and different layout kind of thing. That machine had a 2 GHz AMD processor in it, dual core 64-bit, 2 GB of memory, a 250 GB Toshiba, obviously, hard drive, and Windows Vista Home Premium. Now, Vista was probably part of this machine's problems because it never ran right. Well, outside of a couple of times, and it's really quite unfortunate because when it did run, it ran fairly well. But the problem is that it only worked when it wanted to, which was very rarely. That thing went through, let's count here. It went through a motherboard. Actually, it went through 2 motherboards. It went through all of the case plastics, it went through an LCD panel, went through a webcam, went through a modem, which is ironic because I never even used the modem. Went through a wireless card, went through 3 wireless cards if I remember right, because I replaced one myself. Went through 2 keyboards, 3 trackpads, 8 hard drives. I don't know about the memory, and obviously the processor was replaced when the motherboard was replaced. But basically, I had a brand new machine throughout my entire use of that machine. I had 2 of these, basically, although not all at once. And that thing was so unreliable. When the hard drive failed for the 8th time, sorry, I went through 7 hard drives, but when it failed, the 7th drive failed, which would have been the 8th failure I had with this thing. Though that wouldn't make any sense now, would it? Anyway, whatever, okay. Whatever failure it happened to be, I basically had enough of that. The last drive failure that occurred in it was actually a Seagate 500 gigabyte drive that died in the middle of the hard drive shortage, no less. So it was a fairly expensive drive that ended up failing past the warranty. Actually, no, not past, I don't know. Anyway, whatever. I don't profess to know. But then, of course, it was the passing of, it actually was 2 years that this machine lasted. But to replace this pile, we did not buy a new machine. Rather, we turned to the used market, and this one showed up. This is an IBM ThinkPad, Lenovo ThinkPad T61. I don't understand why everybody is basically all up in arms about that, because this thing could be ordered with IBM badging. Take a look at this. ThinkPad T-Series. That's what that says, and the machine just went to sleep, but that's what that says. You could stick an IBM badge here. It looks the same. This machine, when I first got it, was the lowest of the low. It had a 1.8 gigahertz Intel Core 2 Duo T7100, lowest end processor you could get in one of these. 1 gigabyte of memory. I think that was the lowest official spec for one of these. Although you could probably put 512 in it. It is DDR2, so it is modern enough that you could upgrade it. A 100 gigabyte Seagate hard drive, and Windows XP. The first thing I ever did to that machine, I got it before my birthday, but the first thing that I ever did to that machine, near my birthday, I upgraded the memory with the RAM that was in the L300D. 2 gigabytes right there. That was a fairly worthwhile increase because it was also a higher speed part. And then for my birthday, I promptly upgraded it to 4 gigabytes. And that, I think, is where we even stand till today. But then, a couple of months after I got it, 8 months or so, the weakest link in just about every single computer I've ever had showed up. Of course, I should also mention that I got a WD My Passport drive for this L300D, which replaced a Seagate hard drive, Seagate expansion that I still have the enclosure for. That failed a couple months after I bought it. But the Seagate, and the only Seagate that I've ever seen in a T61, all the others that I've worked with, and I've worked with several of these, that drive failed. So the drive that I bought for the L300D, before I replaced it with this, actually I had these two going concurrently, but I took the drive out of the L300D, sidelined the L300D, and eventually scrapped the L300D. I put that drive in this ThinkPad T61. And then, shortly thereafter, that drive died. Of course, I was running Vista on it at that point, Vista Ultimate. But in any event, that drive failed, and I was without a machine again. And at that point, I actually replaced this T61. It was about 2 years after I got my T61. So again, we're another exception. 2 years after I got the T61, I replaced it. But now, as you can see, it's running. If we take a look at the specs here, I upgraded the processor to a T7700 running at 2.4 gigahertz. It's got 4 gigabytes of RAM in it, and right now it's got a 160 gigabyte Hitachi hard drive in it. And it's running Windows 8.1. The machine that I bought to replace that T61 was this, another used one. This is a Lenovo ThinkPad T500, and this is a Lenovo ThinkPad, even though they're still using the T61 keyboard. But anyway, this is an upgrade from the T61, quite a bit actually. It's got a better processor in it, even though it might not be the fastest thing in the world. But it's got the bigger screen, even though the screen resolution is smaller. Oh yeah, I also replaced the display on this T61, because the original display obviously broke, as you've seen from my prior videos. But this machine is pretty much perfectly functional and in as I got it condition, but I did need to reload Windows 7 fairly early on because, once again, weakest link, the Seagate hard drive, and the only Seagate I've ever seen in a T500 or T400 system, that died. In fact, it was dead in the box because it had failed a smart check. Even though the drive still worked, it had a problem with spinning up and down. I also had a really high reallocation event count. But anyway, so that actually was my first experience calling the Global Asset Recovery Service, or GARS hotline. I believe I've talked about it before and showed you the documentation before, the contradictory documentation. And they were rude to me. I'm not even going to go into the details of that conversation because I don't care to remember the details of that conversation. Needless to say, it was the first time I called that hotline. It was the last time I called that hotline. They wouldn't do a damn thing for me. So unfortunately I had to replace the drive myself, but that actually worked in my favor because I was able to get a 500 gigabyte Western Digital hard drive, which is still in here as my main drive till this day. Also with this system, in terms of upgrades, I upgraded it to 5 gigabytes of memory, and yes, I realize that that's an odd number, but I got a 4 gigabyte module, and there's a 1 gigabyte that's already in here because it had 2 gigs when I first got it. But I noticed a bug very quickly with this system, and that's a bug in the chipset, where that if you had mismatched memory modules, it wouldn't render the display stuff correctly. You would have display glitches. And that got so bad to the point where I had to figure out what was wrong with it. I had to turn off Intel virtualization technology for directed I/O, so that hurt VM performance, but oh well, I'd rather have slow virtual machines than absolutely abysmal display rendering, because I can't stand video glitches. At first I thought there was something wrong with the motherboard, but as it turns out there wasn't. This is using the onboard Intel graphics, of course, no add-on ATI stuff. Other upgrades I've done to it, it has 17 USB ports, and yes, I realize that that's excessive, but I use almost all 17 of those. It's got 5 hard drives installed, a 500 gigabyte here that I actually bought for my Compaq, a 320 gigabyte WD My Passport drive that's been through pretty much all of my machines and is still going strong with no bad sectors, a 1 terabyte Toshiba drive, which replaced a WD Elements 500 gig drive that was a rather large hunk of junk. We've got a 100 or 320 gigabyte Seagate in the Seagate enclosure, and a 2 terabyte that I recently added Toshiba external hard drive as well. And as you can see, it's still running Windows 7, even though it's only 32-bit, but that's okay. You can't have everything, so I've only got 3 gigs available. But over the last year that I've had this machine, it's been incredibly reliable. I've only had the 1 hard drive failure with it, actually the 2 hard drive failures with it, because I did have the WD fail, but I have had to reload the OS a couple of times due to an OS breakage, but that's okay. No big deal. I was able to restore it from an image, which is fine by me. So overall, I think this was a great purchase. I would definitely go do that purchase again. Man, is that ever noisy. But anyway, we'll come back to that. A problem arose a little bit over a month ago when the T400 that you're looking at on your screen right now had its display destroyed in an act of carelessness. Oh well, it is what it is. I wasn't very happy about that, but you can't really undestroy a display, even if it was destroyed in an act of carelessness. So for an interim solution, I gave him my PowerBook G4, which is why I don't have my PowerBook G4 around here anymore right now. But we needed to find a replacement for that. And I decided, you know what? It's been a year. This keyboard, I accidentally spilled a drink in it, and that was before the shift key ended up breaking entirely. Because as you can see, oh, that's not the right piece. I think the right piece is on the floor somewhere, but this is part of one of the scissor switches. You can see that not only has it turned blue, which I think is interesting, because it wasn't a blue drink that I spilt. The other part of this broke. The other one shattered entirely because it got so hard to push the shift key that I had to slam onto it, and that broke, of course, broke the scissor switches. And these fan problems had just started up. It's not a big deal. I do have this installed, so I'm going to turn that fan off entirely. So I can just do that. As you can see, that shuts it up entirely. And if you let it sit for a little while and then turn it back on, it stops making that noise. What's happened is the bearings have just basically become shot. And because of the workload that I placed this thing under, it goes out of balance and makes that vibrating noise. So I should, in theory, replace this fan, but I won't because that involves replacing thermal grease as well. And I don't really want to do that. But anyway, so I have decided basically, well, you know what? It's been a year, and while I'm not at all displeased with the service of this T500, I was looking at the used laptop site, and I found a whole bunch of machines with better processors in them than this T500 has. So you know what? I've decided that it's time to finally replace even this T500. And as you can see, that in addition to having a cat, the new machine has just arrived today. So, I think the video after the next one, we're going to be unboxing that and setting it up. And so we're going to finally replace even this T500. But that leaves us with a little bit of an issue. What's going to happen with the T400 situation? I'm not just going to leave that PowerBook G4 with them. But there's a reason for there's a method in my madness. This T500 is going to replace this T61 as my main portable computer, and this T61 is going to replace that T500 because it is identically spec'd and all of that. I'm not worried about the trackpad issues because I think I'm going to sort those out if the trackpad assembly from that T400 and even the palm rest can be taken off of that machine and put onto the new one. Then that's what we'll do. This machine will be running Windows 7. And in fact, I'm going to take the drive out of the T400 and put it in this and just install the new drivers, uninstall the crap, and get it ready to go. And my new machine, it is a T-Series, but my new machine is going to be running, you'll learn about the specs in the new video, or in the video where I unbox it and set it up. And by the way, there will be no review, no dedicated review of that particular machine, because every single time I make one of those, it just gets swarmed with people who point out all the things wrong with my logic. And you know what? I'm not going to open myself up to that kind of negative criticism, so forget it. I will be reviewing points as I unbox it and take a look at the machine, so that'll basically be my review. But that's going to be running Windows 7, because that's what's running. I know what's in that box. And this is going to also be running Windows 7 because my netbook, and I can't find the netbook right now, is running Windows 8 now. And I don't really particularly care. I don't want to put Windows 8 on this thing because that involves me having to reload this operating system when I could just take my bare bones image and put it on here. So this is going to be really quick. So I guess we should get started with that. Anyway, till my next video, guys. Thank you for watching. If you've got any comments, feel free to leave them down below. And this is CP666 signing off. I'll catch you on the flip side.